Welcome to Marshall Center's Perspectives. My name is Valbona Zeneli, and I am the Program Director for the Black Sea and Eurasia region. Marshall Center Perspectives is an interview with key decision makers and newsmakers who are here at the Marshall Center supporting one of our many programs. Today, it is my privilege to interview Dr. Ioan Pascu, who is the Vice President of the European Parliament. Dr. Pascu was at the Marshall Center to speak to a group of parliamentarians from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The parliamentarians were here as part of a tailored seminar examining regional security. Dr. Pascu is a frequent visitor to the Marshall Center and also an old friend of the Marshall Center. He's a Romanian politician and is a former Minister of Defense of Romania. With nearly a decade of service in the European Parliament, he has certainly seen many changes and developments. Dr. Pascu, thank you for your service to Europe, and it's always a pleasure to have you with us to share your perspectives with our participants.
Thank you very much.
So my first question for you is, so the strategic environment in Europe is clearly being shaped and defined by new geopolitical developments. And we're starting with the financial and economic crisis, with the Brexit vote, migration crisis, the threat of terrorism in Europe, the rise of nationalism and populism in Europe, the challenges in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. So among all those challenges, what is that keeps you awake at night? What are the most pressing challenges?
Well, you know, the fact that they are all emotional, highly emotional, and when you stir up emotions, especially with the population, then it's very difficult to keep your head cool and get, you know, the right decisions in the right time. So I believe, you know, that this is actually the problem which is to be dealt with. But other than that, I consider that the financial and economic crisis has been a game changer, in the sense that the European Union became inward-looking, and therefore we started to neglect what was happening around us, and all of a sudden we discovered that we are encircled by conflicts which start to spill over in through the refugee crisis and also through terrorism, which has transformed the perception of the European citizens. Defense, for instance, and security, which has never been at the top of the agenda, has become a major topic now, and the European leaders are trying to respond to it. So I would say, you know, that there is not one, but all of them, you know, keep us awake at night, combined together.
Bring those
Yes.
challenges, those
Yes.
threats. So you are here this morning to speak to a group of parliamentarians from the Baltics. What do you assess to be the top-tier challenges for this region, and what could be done, should be done to address those challenges?
Well, if we take the declarations and actions coming from Moscow, we see that there is an attempt on the part of the current administration in Moscow to somehow restore the status of Russia to the levels of the Soviet Union. And from that point of view, certainly the countries which have been part of the Soviet Union are in a very sensitive position. But at the same time, let's not forget that the Baltic countries are part of NATO and the EU, and therefore, you know, they have the full protection of those institutions.
Mm-hmm. So, two resolutions were voted by the European Parliament last October on how the European Union should tackle the deteriorating security environment that we see in Europe. And among some of the ideas, the first one was establishing an European Union operational headquarters to plan, command, and manage crisis. And the second one was setting a defense budget of 2% of the GDP, which we have heard for a long time recently. So how much do you think these plans are implementable in the framework of the European Union?
Well, you know, in the European Parliament we are asking for such a headquarter, only that when the leaders of the countries are meeting, the idea has not been accepted by all. And therefore, the word of the moment is that we should make best use of the network of headquarters we have right now, before we think moving to one integrating headquarters. So 2%, it's certainly an engagement which has been validated in Wales, and it's being accomplished now by the NATO countries. 21 countries from the European Union are also members of NATO, and therefore practically we can say that that engagement is also valid for the countries in the European Union. Although there are some reservations when you want to say 2% for the European Union in this respect, but the documents are mentioning the figure, and I am sure the countries will do it.
You mentioned NATO. What do you think about the future of NATO as the main security provider for Europe?
It's a good question, because right now we would like to see what is the concept of a NATO of the new administration. I heard, that the president-elect is speaking about the obsolescence of NATO. But here, we do not know whether being obsolete means that we have to better it, or it means that we have to scrap it altogether. So we are still waiting for indications in this respect. My personal belief is, that NATO will continue to be the same successful alliance as it used to be up until now, and provide the security all countries wanted to have when they practically fought to get into NATO. I wrote a book on Romania's way towards NATO, which is called The Battle for NATO, because it was a battle.
Of course. Going back to defense budgeting, as it is right now, 70% of the defense budget of NATO is covered by the United States. And also considering Brexit, then will be that 80% of the defense budget will be covered by non-EU members. How much that could be sustainable in the long run?
Well, I would say, that without doubt, the European countries, members would have to increase their defense spending, and they have to really reach the 2%, which is the engagement taken in Wales. I believe that there is no other way around. But at the same time, let's not forget that Senator Mansfield in the 60s was raising the same question. Not that I'm saying, that the question has not been sorted out in the meantime, because it wasn't. The United States, like then, today is paying the majority of the expenses of the EU, of NATO. But at the same time, you have to think, that NATO as an alliance, as not as an enterprise with some branches which can be closed down only because they are not profitable. Mercantilist view of a NATO is contradictory to the essence of the alliance, which means collective defense to the members. Not all the members can afford themselves to have the entire array of instruments at their disposal. If they could, then they wouldn't probably ask to get into NATO. So we have to really bridge in between these two views in order to have an effective NATO. But 2% is indispensable.
Which is important for showing political will, because the 2% of some countries...
Plus it's real money, in the European Union now. There is a tendency that the European Commission would start to fund some defense-related projects, civilian defense-related projects. So we are moving in that direction in which, defense is not funded only by national means, but also by community means.
So maybe it could be a wake-up call for the
It will be
European...
a wake-up call, and it is certainly advantageous for the countries which are not so rich, which otherwise, would be very reluctant to invest the scarce resources they have into defense. Although defense, as I said, becomes a major concern of the European citizens.
Thank you. We'll move to another region, to the Black Sea. You were the rapporteur of the European Union on security challenges in the Black Sea region. That was... Yes. Strategic military situation in the Black Sea following the illegal annexation of Crimea. And this was further then adopted from the European Parliament and became a resolution. So how important do you think is the Black Sea basin for the European security?
It is very important because, you know, after almost 150 years of neglect, since the Crimean War, which was in the middle of the 19th century, Black Sea has been a forgotten part of Europe where nothing happened. It was more or less, you know, a Soviet lake, then shared with Turkey, and nothing happened. Everything started to change when important deposits of energy have been found within the basin, and also when, you know, the consumers in the West started to import the resources coming from Central Asia, from the Caucasus. And therefore the Black Sea has become then really important. And now probably it's inevitable that it got also a political military relevance. And what has happened with respect to Georgia in 2008 and with Crimea in 2014, it's evident that this is the case.
Mm-hmm. We see in Europe a rise of nationalism. The generation of leaders such as Helmut Kohl or François Mitterrand, they really believed in a strong European Union. It looks like nowadays there is a new generation of leaders across Europe. They are trying to protect their countries from Europe. Do you think this trend will continue? What we are going to see in the future? What the future of the European Union will look like?
Well, you know, in history there are moments, and I'm speaking about individual countries, there are moments which present themselves, you know, only once for a long number of years. You have to have the generation which is aware and which has the courage to act and take advantage of that opportunity which is presenting itself. For instance, the Romanian generation at the time of 1877-78, when Romania got independence from the Turkish Empire, or in 1918 after the First World War when Romania got reunited with the other territories. So these are achievements which were possible because the opportunity offered was valued by a generation of leaders which were aware and courageous enough to do it. It happens sometimes, you know, that there are big events, important opportunities, and the generation of leaders is not top quality.
And it's not ready maybe to front.
And then, you know, and then you either really lose the opportunity, miss the opportunity, but I think, you know, that even in that case, you have to really elevate yourself at the level of the moment. Even if you cannot do that, you have to overpass you, to overcome all the handicaps you have and try to raise at the level of the challenge. I think, you know, that we are in such a situation because not many people can be called today leaders of the rank of Helmut Kohl or Mitterrand or Roosevelt or others like them, you know. So, but still, these are the leaders we have, and they have to really improve themselves.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we need more leaders and followers of the public opinion.
Yeah, it's true, it's true. You know, some of the leaders are rather followers and stay with their finger on the pulse of the people and say, you want this, I can offer this. You want that, I can offer that. This is not leadership. It's exactly what you said, followership. But still, you know, look at what happens with defense. Defense has been, and defense budgets have been slashed continuously all these years in the European Union, and all of a sudden when defense has become a major concern of the European citizens, the leaders have reacted immediately, which demonstrates that they are capable of elevating themselves at the level of the expectations.
And this is what people are expecting.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. One of the most significant events in 2016 was the Brexit decision of the UK. Do you think other EU nations will follow this path? And how strong and resilient is the European Union without United Kingdom?
Well, in a way, certainly the fact that Britain has decided to step out has been a blow to the European Union. But at the same time, it encouraged the countries to close ranks, try to see what went wrong, and try to improve. So I would say, that this is, shall we say, the positive part of a negative development. Secondly, I would say not all countries, not all the countries in Europe, members of the European Union, are Great Britain. So take Romania, for instance. If we step out, we wouldn't be able to manage ourselves as Great Britain does. And certainly we would be in an area in which power politics is in its fiercest forms, manifested in its fiercest form. And it would be very difficult for us to survive in such an way. So therefore, for us, there is no way that we would get out of the European Union. But there are others. For instance, we'll have elections soon in Holland. And Geert Wilders is leading right now. We will see the outcome, but he is also one who is asking for a referendum. And probably there are many Dutch who would say that's not a bad idea. Still, even if Holland has had an empire, world empire, and were tradesmen for centuries, I don't think that they would be in the position of Britain to be able to sustain such a separation from the European Union. That does not ensure that it would not happen. But then, you will have to have a calculation which is really long time and much more based on concrete facts rather than emotions. For instance, I had a discussion with a friend this morning, and I said I knew that Britain is no quitter, and he gave me the point. And I wished, that when Britain wanted to get into the European Union, they should have thought that perhaps in 40 years they would need to get out, rather than step in and step out. Whoever, and I remember, I was very young when President de Gaulle has opposed twice at the request of Britain. I was immediately after graduation of my faculty when Britain has been accepted. I know what big discussions have been around New Zealand butter, for instance, all of that, to be scrapped in 40 years because things have changed and Britain feels, or the majority of the British population feels, that the EU is not offering the response they are waiting for.
Although on the other side, although the EU is wrapped in its own internal problems, there are still countries which are queuing up to become European Union members, and here I have in mind the Western Balkans and the perspective that these countries have on being integrated in the EU. From the European Parliament perspective, what do you see in the future for these countries?
We continue to monitor them. There are reports which are continuously produced by the report monitoring the situation there, and certainly we would like to see them integrated. And I think, that eventually they will get integrated, but you have to have a constant record of progress. If you have ups and downs, then certainly things tend to slow down. So you need, for a significant period of time, a record of progress in this respect, solid progress, in order to open the gates of the European Union. I'm sure that this will happen.
I fully agree with you. It's standards for first, and it's not scapegoating the European Union and skepticism, raising the skepticism in the countries.
It's also a question on how long do I have to wait, because I live only once. And it's natural that the people would also put it in an individual perspective like this. But at the same time, we should also think, that this is a generational problem. This is with cycles. This is, we are talking of so many members,
of course,
and so on and so forth.
We'll move to another question. The transatlantic economic relation is one of the world's most enduring success stories, being the largest and the most integrated force in the global economy. And as we know, since 2013, negotiations started on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which unfortunately were not concluded within 2016 as it was expected. Where do you see TTIP going, since the European Parliament has an increased role also in looking at these trade negotiations?
Well, I would say, that although from the geostrategic point of view and from the economic point of view, commercial point of view, in many respects, this is to the advantage of both sides of the Atlantic. Although this is so, there are also many people who are against it. For various, I would say, limited interests. Some sectors of population who are not feeling, that this agreement is in their favor, they are opposing it. There are others who oppose it on geostrategic considerations. I don't think that Russia would be too happy to see this agreement being concluded. But the fact of the matter is that this treaty is now frozen. It is frozen not so much 2016, which has been expected to be the year of conclusion, probably could not be because, for instance, Brexit has had an impact. Everything which us in Europe have negotiated with the Americans in financial terms has been having the city of London in mind. And all of a sudden, all our discussion has been in vain because the city is not part of the European Union. So therefore, where have we been left? To give you an example. And then, the new administration, which is questioning the TTP in the Pacific, the fact that China is proposing a substitute of the TTP, and in general, the entire perspective of unraveling of the entire network of international trade agreements is not good, because this is really a big challenge to the current international system as we know it.
Thank you. So you have been an old friend of the Marshall Center. You have been here since a very long time friend, long-time friend of the Marshall Center. And what do you think, what role a place like the Marshall Center, which is a German-American partnership, can play in the European security?
Well, this center has been established in June 1993, and as you know, I was part at creation. I was present at creation here. And the basic idea has been, because Europe was opening up at that time, and we had to breach the cultural divide which existed between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And still today, this is a matter of concern. And I think, that Marshall Center is continuing to play a major role in this respect. Let's see here, we come and confront our own perceptions, my perception versus your perception. And therefore, we can explain ourselves and we can find out why the other side is thinking that way and not the other way. And this is very helpful. Plus the fact that you have an array of lectures which really open up the horizon of the participants. So I think, that the rationale of the Marshall Center is still solid, and I hope to be able to be invited.
Thank you very much for your kind words. So our time has come to an end. I would like to thank you very much for taking time to be with us today here at the Marshall Center and answer to some of our questions. And we hope to see you soon back at the Marshall Center to speak at our participants who love your lectures and discussions with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. For Marshall Center Perspectives, I am Valbona Zeneli.